When the sun sets and darkness falls and your one-eyed optical tube is pointing high and proud into the night sky, does size really matter? Let's ask the universe what she thinks before the neighbours see me and call the police. G'day everyone, I'm Dan. Welcome to Pretty Average Astro. If you're new to this channel and this is the first video you're seeing, don't be too concerned. I'm not usually in a dressing gown with a leg split showing some inner thigh. I promise that's likely to be a one-off. I'm super excited for this video. This was an opportunity that I didn't see coming, and it's something that I couldn't not do. So the motivation behind all of this is a few videos ago I set up my Evoguide 50 ED as a full imaging setup, and I had super awesome results. And one of the images I took was M83, the Southern Pinwheel Galaxy, and I was absolutely blown away at the focal length and aperture of the scope and the results that I got. So behind the scenes, I just decided to take another picture of M83 with the Evolux 82 ED without a flattener, so at f6.5. just to see if there was a difference. I wasn't planning on making a video or anything. It was just out of my own curiosity that I wanted to see what sort of difference there would be. And then about a week or two ago, a Evostar 120 ED came up for sale on the second-hand market at a price that I could not say no to. And my plan was just to use this as a purely visual scope. But I set that up on my manual mount and I just kept on looking back to my imaging rig, and my curiosity got the better of me and I decided to make this video. And this sets us up perfectly. We've got 3 different size scopes, all from the same brand, Skywatcher. All are ED doublets with very similar glass. Both the 50 and 120 definitely have FBL 53. Skywatcher doesn't really say much about the glass in this, but it's meant to be an improvement on FBL 53, but I'm not really sure. So to give you a better idea, I'll go through the specs of each scope and list their recommended retail price. The reason I'm going off their recommended retail price is things fluctuate, so different stores have different sales, and you may buy this scope new and you may buy these scopes secondhand, but at least this gives you a good indication of how Skywatcher values these scopes in comparison. This is the Skywatcher Evoguide 50 ED version 2. It has a 50mm objective, a focal length of 242mm, giving it a fast f4.8 focal ratio. It has a 1.25-inch fine helical focuser, a T2 thread, and a 1.25-inch focus barrel, so connecting an autoguider, camera, eyepiece, or flattener, in my case, is quite easy. It is a doublet ED lens with 2 O'Hara glass lenses, with one lens being SFPL 53. It comes with the guider rings and bracket, and a Vixen finder shoe. Skywatcher's recommended retail price for the Evoguide is $550 Australian. The Evolux 82 ED is Skywatcher's enhancement of the very popular Evostar 80 ED. It comes with the updated 2-lens element with new ED glass, however they don't disclose what type of glass this is. It has a diameter of 82mm with a focal length of 530mm, giving an f ratio of 6.4. With Skywatcher's dedicated flattener, it brings it down to f5.8. And with the Starizona 0.65 reducer that I'm using, it brings it down to a fast f4.2. Has a net weight of 2.6 kilos, a retractable dew shield, and very beefy 2.4-inch dual speed focuser. The recommended retail price is $1,750 Australian. The The Skywatcher 120 ED brings with it an increase in resolution with the 120mm objective and the 900mm focal length with an f ratio of f7.5. Each air-to-glass lens is coated in Skywatcher's proprietary metallic high transmission lens coating, which is equivalent to FPL 53. It has a light baffled optical system and a 2-inch Crayford focuser and comes with a bunch of accessories. And as is standard with refractors, the bigger diameter, the bigger the price. So there's quite a big increase to a recommended retail price of $4,250 Australian. So that's the details. Big differences in specifications and even bigger differences in pricing. So the target test is going to be M83, the Southern Pinwheel Galaxy. I'm going to take as many exposures as I can with each scope. The amount of exposures may differ, but I will process those images the best of my ability using the same process that I always do. And to make it fair, I'll also compare single frames from each scope of M83, do a rough edit utilizing the same process and see if we can see the differences in detail and resolution. So let's get to it. So we've got the 120 ED Canon set up now. As you can see with the telescope length and the height of the tripod, this is pretty much going to give everyone a telescope clearance anxiety. I was going to use my HEQ5 extension pier that's on my manual mount at the moment, but because I'm going to be chopping and changing so much, I just couldn't be bothered. But it is pretty much balanced. It's roughly focused from last night, so it's pretty much good to go. And I'm just going to have to watch it with meridian flips, etc. with the clearance, but I think we should be okay. And despite a bit of extra weight with the telescope and another counterweight, I was still able to carry it out with not too many issues. It's obviously a little bit heavier and I have to watch the door frame as I'm coming out, but it wasn't too bad. And I brought out the SV Boney 30mm guide scope out from retirement, so I'm glad to see that one's back in action. And setting up, everything was pretty easy. Cable management wasn't too bad, just had to extend some cables, but I've mounted the ASI Air in the finder scope and got the guide scope on the telescope's rings. I'm not using any reducers or flatteners, so it'll just be the native f7.5 and the 533 MC chip, and it's framed really, really well with the M83 Galaxy, so I'm really happy with that. It also means that I don't have to worry about any back focus issues. And I'm just using the Zero 2-inch filter draw with the Beta Moon and Sky Glow filter. We haven't been too bad with dew over the nights the last couple of weeks, but I was a little worried because the SV Boney guide scope doesn't really have much in the way of dew shield. And I was worried about the short dew shield on the Skywatcher 120. So what I've done, I've put the dew heater on the main telescope and I've jerry-rigged a toilet roll for a bit of dew protection on the guide scope. I'm pretty sure that'll work pretty well. So a bit dodged, but I think we'll be fine. I'm hoping to get 2 nights of imaging, so they'll be the same 5-minute exposures as the Evolux, and yeah, let's see how we go. And I don't know why I'm wearing a shirt, it's freezing.
Man, I love this HEQ5. A heavier telescope, an extra counterweight, the target's at zenith, and this thing is guiding like an absolute champ. Absolutely love it.
So last night I set an alarm for the meridian flip, but I missed it by about 10 minutes, probably because I hit snooze at midnight. And when I opened the ASI Air app, it was already done and guiding perfectly. So that was very fortunate for me. And there she is, safe in the home position. So all went really, really well, especially the toilet paper roll. What a little legend. So the results are in, and I actually found them really, really interesting, to the point where I think it'll give you hope in whatever rig, telescope, camera that you're currently using, and how you can kind of level the playing field by adjusting how you shoot your targets depending on what sort of scope you're using. In this case, it's very refractor based. So as I opened up PixInsight to take a closer look, I was obviously really, really happy with all of those images, but what I wasn't happy with was how I was going to compare them, because they all had different exposure times. So the Evoguide had about 4 hours, the Evolux had 14 hours, the 120 ED had about 8 hours, but the Canon also had 4 hours, so that's a really good comparison between those two. So what I've done to make it fair is I've taken a single frame, and that's what we're going to really compare. And to make it even, because the Evoguide exposures were 60 seconds and the rest were 5 minutes, I've stacked 5 60-second frames for this. So starting off, we'll take a quick look at the final result of each setup, and we'll start off with the Canon image, which you didn't actually get to see in the first part of this video. But when I took this, I was super, super happy. I'd never taken a picture of a Galaxy this good. So a little bit blurry, I guess, which is kind of expected with the F ratio and the large sensor, but I was super happy with that. And then comparing that to the Evoguide and the 533, this was a massive difference, and I was really, really impressed with this image. Just how dense all that dust and stuff was. It was crazy, and it blew my mind that a scope that small took this image. Really, really cool. Then moving on to the Evolux again, 14 hours of exposure, and I think this is my favorite one, besides what looks to be a chromatic aberration, but there's a twist in that story too, which I'll explain in a little bit. But really, really like the detail and the glow. Really, really happy with that. And then the Evostar 120 ED. And they're also edited quite differently, which is why I didn't want to compare these final images. I'd rather do the single frames. Now, this is only 8 hours, but I felt like the detail was finer, and I've probably over sharpened and probably a bit too much contrast, but I was trying to bring out as much of that hydrogen alpha that I could in those little ball pockets. So just going back to the Evolux and the blue stars, I was really, really gobsmacked because I hadn't run into this before, and it only happened when I started to use my new beta moon and sky glow filter, and I thought, well, that's strange, or maybe I just didn't notice it before. I've been doing a lot of narrow band, so that's probably taking out a lot of the chromatic aberration that I thought it had. But then I thought, well, I'll just take the filter out and do another frame. I can't remember what star this was on, but when I took the filter out, all the blue kind of disappeared. So if you look at especially these 3 stars here, if I move up a little bit, all these bright stars, that chromatic aberration kind of disappeared. So I don't know if it's just a weird kind of combination where the moon and sky glow filter really affects the Evolux. It definitely didn't affect the 120 ED, but I just thought that was quite interesting. So I might just have to stick to a IR cut filter for the Evolux. So moving on to the single frames, I was going to do a small edit on each and do a bit of blur, do a bit of automatic background extraction, but after just doing an SDF stretch, that's all you need to see in my opinion. So I'll start off with the Canon, a single 5-minute frame, ISO 800, tell that really wide field of view, and zooming in, this is the amount of detail that we're getting to the Canon. Bringing up the Evoguides, 5 minutes worth of data. Obviously grayscale and color, but you can see that there's a lot more detail with that sensor of the 533. I think that's making the real difference. And it's kind of changed my view on how important Astro versus DSLR cameras are. I was always trying to get the best of what I had, especially with the DSLR, and I thought I could get close to some of these, but you can tell right away how much of a difference these cameras make, and I think they're definitely worth the investment. Bringing up the Evolux. So with this one, again, that's quite a noticeable difference, I think, between the Evoguide and the Evolux, jumping from 50mm to 80mm, and same scope, different cameras. That's insane. That's really, really, so I think that really hammers home how much of a difference that 533 makes. And now bringing up the Evostar 120. So again, I'd probably say, obviously compared to the Canon and the Evolux, there's no comparison there. Probably a massive jump between the Evoguide, obviously, like the how clean, how much cleaner, how much detail that's got is pretty insane. So if I close the Evoguide and just compare the Evolux, is probably not as big of a jump between kind of the Evoguide going to either the 80 or the 120, but still you can definitely see, especially when you start to focus on the inner dust lanes, all the fine ones, like they're not resolved at the 82 ED yet, and they're quite good on the 120. So I'm really impressed with that 120, and I'm planning to use that for a visual scope. So we'll see how that goes. But I think that 120 is really, really versatile. That f7.5 I think is a really good sweet spot, and it really, really impressed me with the Galaxies. I just wish I got 14 hours instead of the 8 like I did the Evolux. So I haven't even really looked at these this close before shooting this video, so I'm kind of seeing it with you guys. So but this is exactly what I wanted to find out, and this is what I wanted to share in this video, and I think it's pretty informative. So a lot of the time you'll hear focal length is really important for, you know, collecting data, and the faster your scope is, the quicker you're going to collect data, and if you have a slower scope, the more exposures you're going to need. Where I find it's kind of similar when you're zooming in on a target, and it depends on your focal length as well, where the 120 is a slower scope, but it's more zoomed in and it's getting more detail than a faster scope. So With the faster scope, you now have to collect more data to get the detail in the final image like we have here. So I'll probably wrap that up there. At the start of this video, you're probably like, who's this wanker with 3 telescopes? Who has 3 telescopes? But the point of this video that I wanted to make is you can get amazing results with what you have already. And I'm hoping this video just gives you tips on how you can get more out of what you've got already. So each one of these telescopes are amazing. The results that you can get with each telescope is amazing. And some are just a little bit better at some things, but you can put in some work to try and get to that level as well. So I hope that's helpful, and hopefully I won't be too long between videos. But thanks very much for watching again. Thank you heaps for just liking my video and commenting and subscribing if you're enjoying it as well. So I really appreciate that, and see you soon.